Okay, folks, one of the questions that I got asked when I was critiquing all of these crowdfunded and other campaign comics like I Saw Number One was why is it I never critique the Marvel or DC stuff? There's all these Marvel and DC comics coming out, and maybe they're filled with woke garbage, maybe it's these event book type things after event book after event book, et cetera, et cetera. Why is it I'm not critiquing any of those things? And the reason is largely that I don't read much Marvel or DC anymore. As far as the stuff that I would personally collect, Marvel and DC is down to a bare minimum. I mostly go for reprints like Marvel's Epic collections. Those are just excellent collections of some Marvel's earliest work. Right now, I'm reading the first volume of Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm into now. I don't really read much of the modern Marvel stuff or DC stuff. But every once in a while, there is a series that kind of piques my interest, and I will, investigate it and see if it's worth getting. And if so, great. If not, whatever. There was a particular event series that was written by Tom King back in 2019, and it's called Heroes in Crisis. Now, I didn't even realize the tie of the crisis title, but basically everything that DC does that's supposed to be an event is a crisis of some sort. And so, Heroes in Crisis was, well, I will get into that, but I want to basically do this video just to say that yes, I am perfectly capable of looking at DC comics or Marvel comics and critiquing them in some of the ways that I've been critiquing the campaign comics of late. So, Heroes in Crisis. What was Heroes in Crisis about? Well, I will take you through each of the issues in turn and give you an idea of what's going on. So, one of the things that I want to tell you about Heroes in Crisis first is that they had excellent variant covers. Like, for example, they had a whole line of covers that represented case files representing traumatic events in the lives of various superheroes. So you had one for Superman, you would eventually have one for Batman, for Wonder Woman, for Aquaman, for Robin, on and on. And these were perfectly tailored to the series. And one of the suggestions that I have to give is that when you're doing variant covers, if you're doing variant covers, because I find variant covers extremely annoying for the most part, make sure that they tie in some way to your series or have some sort of common theme amongst them so that people are going to want to get these particular variant covers. Don't just necessarily go out and grab some, hot artist and have that person do your cover. I mean, that may work. I mean, I know there's people who basically say, "Oh, get a Dale Keown cover. That's the best." And maybe that works. Maybe it doesn't. I know there was one guy who paid like $3,000 to $5,000 for a Boris Vallejo cover on a comic that, interior wise, didn't look anything like Boris Vallejo art. But really, what I would just suggest is if you can't get something that's going to match the interiors, as well as just having your regular covers match the interiors, why don't you have something that illustrates the theme of your book in some way, shape, or form that makes the variant covers interesting? That's what I would suggest as far as variant covers go. So, Heroes in Crisis number one opens with Booster Gold sitting in a diner in Gordon, Nebraska. And you can see he's a little bit beaten up because his costume's torn at the leg, and you can see a little bit of a scratch where he's got a blood stain. And he's just getting himself some coffee, and then in walks Harley Quinn. And the waitress basically asks, "Is there going to be a fight?" And Booster Gold said, "Yeah, there's going to be a fight." So, interesting setup, but we don't know what the heck is going on. It looks like Harley Quinn is mad at Booster Gold for some reason that he's apparently aware of. We next shift to a scene where we're over Nebraska, although how the hell are we supposed to know that, by the way? I mean, I know just from having traveled across the country on an airplane that yes, the heartland looks largely like this. You have these large square patches of ground where you're farming this crop or that crop. But how do we know this is over Nebraska, essentially, as opposed to over some other state of the union? It would be nice if you had a little caption that said something like "over Nebraska" or "just outside Gordon, Nebraska," something like that. Then we make a transition to one of the main conceits of this series. We're dealing with Harley Quinn here, who is in some sort of counseling session. And ironically, she herself is a counselor, and so she's making fun of counseling. But by the end of this 9 panel session, she starts breaking down because she has actual trauma that she's experienced, and now she's allowing some of it to come out. So, this is a common theme throughout the series that you are going to see various characters having counseling sessions of some sort. We then get returned to the diner where Harley Quinn has gotten her and she's looking a little bit worse for wear herself. She's got a few blood spatters and stuff on her. She orders the peach pie, and they're just doing this normal thing together, which basically ups the tension. I do like the way that the tension gets raised in the book by just having this insane person doing normal things. It's almost threatening just to have that person nearby. We find that the red streak that was flying over the American heartland was in fact Superman, whose sonic boom, as he arrives over this secluded farmhouse, it looks like, the sonic boom he generates scares off some crows. And you will notice down here in the left-hand corner that you've got a crow chomping on some gristle. It's human gristle. It's shrunken human gristle, because that is a small superhero mask peeking out of the crow's beak. And we find out in the next page or so that it belongs to a superhero called Blue Jay. He shrinks kind of like the Atom does, and so apparently when he was in his shrunken form, he died, and now the birds are basically munching on him. It's a very very disturbing sequence, I have to say, but gotta love that kind of stuff. Well, now Harley's gone into full, complete insanity mode, and she is now stabbing Booster Gold in the diner, and he basically fights her off. And meanwhile, Batman and Wonder Woman are converging on the house that Superman is hovering over, which happens to be a crime scene. You can see up in the upper right hand corner, you've got a whole bunch of dead bodies. And Superman basically says they're all gone. Everyone he finds at the house is dead. And that includes, as he approaches inside the house, a couple of A-list type superheroes. You've got Arsenal, who is Roy Harper, also known as Speedy, who was the sidekick of Green Arrow. And then you have the Flash, but not Barry Allen. It's Wally West, who took on the mantle of the Flash when Barry Allen was dead and gone. So you've got Arsenal and Wally West both dead inside Sanctuary as well. Superman calls it Sanctuary. And then Sanctuary itself, which appears to have been populated with a mom and pop and a servant of some sort, guests, reception kind of thing. They've got blue blood, so they're androids. They've got wires sticking out of them all over the place. And Superman says Sanctuary is confirmed. So Sanctuary, this place, this house out in the middle of Nebraska, was home to a number of superheroes or something, and everybody there is dead. So Superman says, we built this to help them. I mean, to help us. And now, and then Batman says, someone was being treated here by Sanctuary, along with a lot of other heroes. And the reason he pauses is that he happens to see a villain among the heroes who are there. And then Wonder Woman says, and that someone killed Sanctuary and a lot of other heroes. We then cut back to the end of the Booster Gold Harley Quinn fight, where they each accuse the other of doing the murders. So apparently they were there at the house, and each saw the other in some way killing the rest of the inhabitants. And then Booster Gold is recorded in a session and basically lays out everything that's been explained through events in the series so far. He says, "You're Sanctuary, the robot super reality therapist. built with Kryptonian tech and infused with the will of Batman, the compassion of Wonder Woman, and of course, the honor of Superman. You help heroes who have seen too much or done too much. All us heroes, all fighting all the time, and because of all that we're just all messed up, including me. So, this is the first issue of Heroes in Crisis. And so, what we've determined is that there has been this counseling center for superheroes out in the middle of Nebraska. Booster Gold and Harley Quinn were both in attendance there. Murders happened there. All of the inhabitants, including Sanctuary itself, and some A-list, including some A-list as well as D-list heroes, like Arsenal and Flash, were killed there. And Booster Gold and Harley Quinn both somehow survived. And not only that, but each thinks the other did the murders. And now we have Superman and Wonder Woman and Batman, who built Sanctuary in the first place, going there and they're going to investigate who did the murders. Now, what went wrong with this issue? Well, I'll tell you what went wrong with this issue in particular did not have so much to do with this issue itself, but what happened outside the issue. And the problem is ad copy. In the ads for Heroes in Crisis #1, everything that I just told you about the issue was in the freaking ad. It says right in here, welcome to Sanctuary, an ultra-secret hospital for superheroes who've been traumatized by crime fighting and cosmic combat. But something goes inexplicably wrong when many patients wind up dead, with two well-known operators as the prime suspects, Harley Quinn and Booster Gold. I mean, they even tell us who the suspects are in here. There is nothing you can learn from Heroes in Crisis #1 that you didn't learn from this ad. Never advertise your comic in such a way that when your reader is done with the comic, he's learned nothing new. You should have some sort of mystery still held within your advertising, so that when the reader hits the comic, it's not just everything that the reader already knows. So this is horrible advertising on DC's part, and it made Heroes in Crisis #1 such a non-event because, my God, there wasn't anything about it to say. There wasn't anything that the book said that wasn't already said in the ad. Oh my gosh. And the other thing is that one of the major conceits of Heroes in Crisis #1 is the counseling sessions, where you have heroes like Blue Jay saying, I go to sleep and I wake up small, and I'll have sheets on top of me, all over me, like an ocean. I'll be drowning in my own bed. So he's losing control of his powers, and these unconscious nocturnal emissions of power basically is troubling him. Then you have Arsenal, who we already know from long-time history is a drug addict, talking about his drug addiction. And then you have Booster Gold, who just is ready to collapse into a heap, apparently. These counseling sessions are really supposed to be the meat of the book. But at the same time, they're often so tremendously boring and not insightful into the characters at all. We don't hear about the things that have necessarily traumatized them. We don't hear about, how Sanctuary is actually helping them through this. There's a lot of material to be mined here, but it's just basically left on the surface for us to just kind of scratch around, and it's not really thought-provoking. So I was disappointed by just the shallow level of depth to which these counseling sessions went. Now we go to Heroes in Crisis #2, and I'm just going to show you the variant covers because those are my favorites. You got Batman's having his back broken by Bane in this particular one. And it starts off with Batman talking about how Sanctuary is anonymous. This allows heroes to talk about their pain and shame. All information gathered by Sanctuary is immediately deleted. Who comes, what they say, when they leave. Everything is erased, nothing is reported. It needed to be anonymous, so it stayed anonymous. I know because I was there often. And that's Batman talking. So Batman has actually used Sanctuary. Now, the interesting thing about this is that this means Sanctuary has to be an inpatient therapy center. You cannot have outpatient therapy on this basis. So when Batman says, I was there often, I have to wonder about just exactly how much he was helping himself with this, because for an inpatient session, you have to basically stay there through the process of treatment until you're cured, or until you're at least in a stable place. Because otherwise, this machine is going to lose all your information and you're going to have to start over from scratch. So if you've told this machine all about your family and stuff, and then you realize, oh, okay, I feel better now. When you leave and if you come back, you're going to have to tell all of your original pain and trauma all over again. So this has to be an inpatient thing that Sanctuary is, which again could have been more material to be mined, but I just thought it was necessary to point out this was not just outpatient where you come in and you talk for an hour and then you go back out and do your superheroing. No, you have to stay there for a while. And here we actually see a counseling session with Batman, where he's saying, I train partners to work with me. They become my family. I've watched so many of them die. Like, yada, yada. We kind of know this. And then Wonder Woman has also been a patient. She talks about a traumatic happening from her childhood when she had a nightmare and then went to get her mother, but her mother was in even worse straits than she was. And then Superman as Clark Kent, revealing his identity, by the way, in this video, and talking about the fact that, well, I was just a Kansas kid, and then it turned out I had other parents, which is an interesting take on Superman's psychology. So you've got the founding three members of Sanctuary. As they said, they built the place to help themselves and then opened it up to help other people. We move next to Booster Gold waking up on the grass after his fight with Harley Quinn. Apparently, he was in pretty bad shape, but his robot friend Skeets fixed him with medical technology from the future. And so Booster Gold puts together a wacky plan to involve the Flash in trying to figure out what went wrong over at Sanctuary. The problem is that yes, Flash is a great he is a great hero to go to because he is a crime scene investigator. That's his actual job as Barry Allen. It's not so good an idea in the fact that Wally West is his nephew as well as another Flash and is one of the murder victims. And since Booster Gold is himself one of the primary suspects in these killings, Flash does not take it well. So Flash apprehends Booster Gold and takes him back to the Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. And then from the corpse of Commander Steel, who I would put down as kind of a C or D list superhero, they find chatty teeth tying him to Harley Quinn. And so the Trinity find Harley Quinn hiding out, but she manages to outwit and escape them, which I think is one of the most ridiculously written things in this book. I mean, she's an insane lunatic with no powers whatsoever, barely any gimmicks to her name, and she overpowers the DC Trinity. Okay, fine. Try and make her an A-lister, and yeah, it's just not working for me. So she escapes rather than gets caught. And then we cut to a scene with Lois Lane at the Daily Planet, where a whistleblower has just dropped a file in Lois Lane's whistleblower receptacle, whatever it is, at the newspaper where you can anonymously contribute information. And what they find is that it is Arsenal's recording of his talking about being a drug addict. And so when Lois Lane realizes what that is, she freaks out because now she knows that the superheroes' secrets at Sanctuary have become somehow undeleted and unguarded. They're out there, not necessarily for public review, but they're out there in somebody's hands. And somebody is able to leak this information if they want. And that's not good. Because you've got things like Superman revealing his secret identity, but moreover, talking about how the kinds of things that they're experiencing are so troubling and embarrassing that They just don't talk about them to the public. They can't talk about them to the public because the public would not want to see them like this in this state. The public doesn't want to see heroes dealing with their trauma. He says to be a hero, you have to be perfect, but this is not perfect. I don't say these things. We can't say these things. What if it got out? And now it's out. At least it's out to whoever has the files. That just makes things incredibly severe now. Now we are looking at a time sensitive crisis because before we had a murder. We had a bunch of people murdered, but what we didn't have was really a time crunch. Now we have a time crunch. And my feeling that what went wrong is precisely that we buried the lead. This time crunch is what makes the series exciting. When I saw this, I thought to myself, "Oh my god." The secrets of the heroes could be revealed to the public, and now all the heroes have to come together to solve these murders as fast as they can. Because now, if they don't, their secrets could be exposed to everyone. This is not good. So, the amazing thing is that he buries this at the end of issue 2. It's like, this is what you start with. This is where you begin. Make it exciting from the start. Ugh. And now here's the worst thing. We get to Heroes in Crisis number 3. And what happens? We get a flashback issue. Oh my god, seriously? You give us a flashback issue after you've just dumped on us the most exciting thing about the series? That's crazy. Yeah, the whole issue focuses on the case files of Lagoon Boy, The Flash, and Booster Gold. It's a complete waste of an issue. Now, spoiler warning though, because I'm going to start telling you things that are going to reveal the identity of the murderer. And this is the point at which, if you actually are interested in reading this series, I would suggest you break away and go ahead and read the series and then come back. And we'll go ahead and talk about it more then. So let's do that. In fact, what I'm going to do is, because I have a problem with my video right now, I'm going to close my PowerPoint for a second. I'm going to reopen my PowerPoint. Come on back up. God, I hope it lets it come back up. Ooh, I might be having a problem here. There we go. And yeah, I was having a little problem there because what I like to see is these little snippets along the side. See, you should be reading the book right now. Okay, there we go. All right, everything looks good again. Okay, so you should be reading the book right now, and hopefully you finished reading the book in this time, because I'm going to go on to spoiler material. This is going to start talking about who the murderer is and why it was really kind of obvious from the first. So, spoiler countdown 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and here we go. There is absolutely no reason that Wally West should have been in the list of people who had been killed at Sanctuary. That's just absolutely ridiculous. And the reason being is that he had just been brought back from oblivion not 3 years earlier in DC Universe's Rebirth. In fact, he was the one who revealed to the DC Universe that it had been tampered with by an outside force, that years had been stolen from it, and memories had gone goodbye. And so the idea that this series, Heroes in Crisis, which is just like some shoved off to the side crisis event, the idea that this is going to be what takes him out of the game permanently is just ludicrous. And so when I saw his body show up, I was like, something's up. I mean, I kind of expected Arsenal to die from the list of possible contenders that they said would be the ones who might possibly get it. But Wally West, I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. And so that led me to be very, very suspicious about the fact that Wally was in there. And sure enough, in issue number 3, when we are looking at the flashback of the murder in progress, we're seeing Wally cradling Roy's body, and he's cradling him outside the house, you might notice. Their bodies were discovered inside the house. And he says, Roy, why? Why did it? Right? Why did it? Why? What's it? And then he says, the kids. I didn't want to be alone. And well, he's talking about his kids from back prior to Flashpoint when he was the Flash and he was married to Linda Park and he had 2 kids, Jay and Iris. And he misses them terribly because although he and Linda are back in the Rebirth universe, their kids are not. And so that's part of the trauma that he's been suffering and being at Sanctuary for. But he's saying, I didn't want to be alone, and why did it? It's like, what happened, and what did you, Flash, have to do with it? I mean, there's no real way to read this stuff and think that he didn't have something to do with the murders somehow. Now, then in the next scene, you see Harley Quinn bash his head in, and this is supposedly how he dies. And then Booster Gold witnesses it, and this is Booster Gold's memory of the events. He witnesses Harley Quinn bashing Wally West's head in. Now, what went wrong with this issue? Well, basically what I told you. I mean, it's just the fact that this was a flashback issue, and not only that, but it's really starting to give the game away like right from the front. It really a good murder mystery should keep you couched in confusion for probably the first 2/3 of it. And it seems like we haven't even gotten done with the first third. This is a 9-issue series. And already we're getting hints that are dropping serious clues to the identity of the real murderer, or at least somebody who was involved in the killing. And again, just the choice of Wally West as one of the victims is enough to just throw this whole thing awry. Because why in the world would you bring him back for Rebirth and then just take him out so soon again? So, moving on to issue number 4, we see the time when Aquaman's hand got eaten by piranha. That was kind of a shocker of a thing back in the day. And so we have Batman and the Flash, who are like, you got the crime scene analyst, and then you got the world's greatest detective, and they're both coming up with different answers. The Flash thinks it's Booster, Batman thinks it's Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn turns herself into Batgirl, who finds her and convinces her that, they should be looking into the crime together. Likewise, Booster Gold is taken by Blue Beetle, who abducts him out of the Trinity cell and says, we really need to be investigating this crime ourselves. So now you've got both of the prime suspects in the crime investigating the crime, as well as Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. Meanwhile, you have Lois Lane releasing a expose on Sanctuary since she can't keep the information suppressed anymore. She has to at least reveal the fact that there does exist this sanctuary where heroes are getting mental health therapy. And that's going to be the big bombshell reveal of this particular issue. So what went wrong? There is a lot of wasted space in this issue, frankly. There is, for one thing, a 2-page spread for the splash page. And, this is showing Wonder Woman carrying a drunk Tempest, or, formerly Aqualad, home in mourning the death of Roy Harper. And, I hate to see space wasted where there could have been story. This is a 9-issue series, and I would say if you got rid of all the wasted space, including the 2-page covers, the 2-page splash spreads, and some of the choices like the ones I'm going to show you, you probably could have narrowed this down to 8 issues and saved the reader about $4. So I really don't like the fact that you use up the space like this. This is Clayman doing the art. You have some beautiful pictures, I grant you, but this particular scene is showing Green Arrow and Black Canary doing a sort of memorial service for Roy Harper, but they don't really talk about their own emotions very much. They're just basically angry that the murder hasn't been solved yet, and making threats at Batman, saying, "Well, we're gonna just find both of them and let God sort it out." And even the confessional stage with Black Canary, you've got You've got to just get up and walk away, and we're stuck looking at a blank screen for the next 6 panels. I mean, thanks. Yeah, we really needed that. I mean, it's just I don't like I don't like wasted space, and the most egregious use of wasted space in this issue has got to be Lois Lane in her Superman shirt and red panties, asking, "What do you want me to do?" Now, we don't know what the conversation she's in right now because that's the first sentence of the conversation. She's saying, "What do you want me to do?" I mean, looking like that, I can think of a few things. But what she's actually doing is she's talking to her husband, Clark, who, now I know he uses tidy whities, and I could have gone my entire life without knowing that. But they're basically talking about the fact that they have to put together some sort of expose on Sanctuary. They can't keep it hidden anymore. And he feels bad about that because he doesn't like the thought of people knowing that, heroes get into this. He doesn't want the public worrying about them and thinking maybe they are a matter of concern, given that they're these super powered vehicles, basically. And, if they're becoming troubled in the same way that, say, Vietnam veterans or something would be becoming troubled after going off to war, then you could wind up with an image of superheroes that is counterproductive. But the thing about this is if you look at Lois here, this whole page doesn't need to be there. You could have put her dialogue if you flip the first panel around so that it would read with her silhouette on the left. She could be asking, "What do you want me to do?" And he could say, "I don't know." And this could be a conversation between the two of them that all takes place on this one page. And so that's why I hate this kind of wasted space. And I would love to see the script that Tom King actually wrote for this issue, because I actually had the opportunity to ask Clay Mann. I said, "Did it actually ask you to do a one-page, spread of Lois Lane in her underwear or in a T-shirt in her underwear?" Or did it have something else there? And he basically just kind of he basically said, "I just draw what they tell me." But I have a feeling that it was kind of like draw a 2-page conversation between Superman and Lois Lane, and he was like, "Yeah, I think I could get a sexy shot of Lois out of this that I could sell the original art for a nice pretty penny." I sometimes wonder if that's how artists think. How do I get a splash page out of this so that I can sell it at a comic book show? That may very well be what runs through many comic book artists' minds. So in this case, I think that's probably what happened here. You had a 2-page conversation where Clay Mann was able to get a nice shot of Lois out of it. Okie doke, but it's still wasted space. This whole page is basically wasted as far as story is concerned. Now, going on to issue number 5, we're looking at the murder of Jason Todd by the Joker here. Uh, we open with Superman giving a conference, and this press conference makes up the majority of the issue's importance. He basically talks about the fact that Sanctuary does exist, and yes, we are getting mental health therapy, but no, you should not be scared of us on account of that. It should comfort you that we need healing just as much as you do. It is not the mark of a madman; it is the wound of a warrior. And the only towards the as far as going to solve the mystery goes, we find out that Wally West's body that was found at the crime scene is 5 days older than it should be. That's what Booster Gold is able to determine with his futuristic time travel tech. It's a body from 5 days in the future, essentially, or at least 5 days from the time of the killing. So, what went wrong with this issue? Well, it's preachy as hell. Basically, the bulk of this issue is one large preachy statement on the fact that there are people out there, superheroes being kind of the first responders to these cosmic or even low level threats. And they are constantly being bombarded with trauma after trauma after trauma of various kinds and various intensities. And we just expect them to bounce back from that, but sometimes they need help bouncing back from that. And so we're getting this humongous mental health speech from Tom King, essentially. Now, what's really bothersome about that is that it's not like this isn't something we haven't known for the last, oh, I don't know, 40 years. I mean, when First Blood came out, it was basically a peon to the idea that we weren't giving enough mental health relief to the soldiers coming back from Vietnam. We were training them to go off and do these terrible things in America's name, then coming back to America and they were being spit upon by people calling them baby killers, and then they weren't getting the mental health services that they needed to successfully reintegrate into society. And so the idea of the crazed Vietnam vet who, when pushed too far, would unleash his skills on America, that was a very real thing that we had to deal with already. This was back in 1982. This was practically 40 years before Heroes in Crisis came out. And then after that, a few years after First Blood, we had the debut of Star Trek The Next Generation, one of whose primary characters was a counselor. She was a mental health counselor, and she would give people mental health counseling during the course of the show. That was part of her job. So, my goodness, we know about the mental health things. And then what about The Sopranos that came out a few years after that? Like, goodness gracious, I think we've been drowning in the whole mental health is essential kind of rhetoric where we don't need to be preached at about this particular subject anymore. I don't know why Tom King thought this was something that comic book readers would gravitate towards. I mean, comic book readers, we probably have enough issues on our own that we know the value of mental health, especially today when you look at some of the people writing and reading these books. So now we get to Heroes in Crisis number 6, and this is dealing with the loss of Barry Allen in the first Crisis on Infinite Earths. And the only thing, this is like a total throwaway issue, the only actual thing that is added in this book is the murder as viewed from Harley Quinn's perspective. She sees Wally West zapped from behind or from the front by Booster Gold, and zapped rather than bashed on the head. By the way, you could think they could compare notes and figure out from the body what actually happened. But this is from her perspective. And the idea of what went wrong is just the fact that, hey, this is all you added. Plus, there has never been a point during the series so far, even when Booster and Harley have been together, where they've compared notes and said, well, what did you see exactly? Or what did you see exactly? Because then they would have had a discrepancy between what they saw that they could have taken back to the heroes and say, look, you can at least judge between one of us or the other. How did Wally West die? Was he bashed on the head, or was he shot through with an energy blast? If you could tell us which one of those it was, then we could at least eliminate one of us as the suspect. But they didn't even go that far. So, they're not the sharpest tools in the shed. Next up, we have the death of Kilowog featured on the cover, which comes back from Green Lantern Hal Jordan's Insane Days. And we get finally a confrontation between Harley Quinn and Booster Gold, where they basically fight it out one last time. And Booster Gold surrenders, and Harley Quinn decides not to kill him. And basically, they're going to join forces now. And they two, together with Batgirl and Blue Beetle, are going to figure out this murder altogether. They basically, now the two prime suspects have joined forces. And what they realize is that, okay, if Wally's body is 5 days older than when he died, or when he was supposed to have died, then he's still alive. It's still within that 5 day window. So they're going to look for him based on time travel readings and signatures and stuff like that, and use Skeets' technology and use Blue Beetle's technology, and they're going to track down the signature of somebody who's been pulled through time. So that is how they're going to find the living Wally West, who apparently is still alive because his corpse is 5 days older than it should be. And we also get a little thing here about why Wally West was in therapy in the first place, and it just kind of a little bit more explanation. And we last leave off with him planting a rose in a field. That rose turns into a new form of poison ivy, and Poison Ivy being one of the characters that was killed at the sanctuary. So she actually manages to regrow herself from that rose. And then Wally apologizes to her and says, I hurt you, and then I did this, meaning help to regrow you, so this doesn't make up for the hurt. At this point, he's basically confessing to the murders, to her murder especially, or at least to being an accomplice in it. We're not quite yet sure exactly what happened, but the fact that he was involved and it doesn't look like anybody else was involved so far, it kind of points every finger toward him. So what went wrong here? I mean, basically, we're just kind of winding down. It's almost like this issue kind of forcibly points everybody in the direction of, who is the real killer? Why did this happen? And sure enough, in issue number 8, we learn that Wally is going to make a confession on video, and he does this at Sanctuary. It's clear that he was alive after some of these killings had taken place because you see the blood stain on the Sanctuary symbol. And what happened is that he kind of lost confidence in Sanctuary. He didn't understand why is it that Sanctuary is an anonymous thing? Why is it that people are hiding the fact that this is out here? And he started to get this idea in his head that maybe this was all for his benefit. Maybe this was something that Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, whoever else created just for him. And he wanted to, because he felt so alone and he felt like nobody was on the same page or had suffered the same things as him, that he wanted to find proof that there were other heroes experiencing the same trauma. And so, as he was exploring the computer system and asking it questions, he found out that yes, all this data gets deleted, but the way that it deletes it is it fragments it among, however, according to various algorithms. And it would take a normal person 1 billion years in order to restore the deleted data from the deletion algorithm. Well, guess what? Wally West is the fastest man alive. And being the fastest man alive, that means it took him a few seconds to piece together all of the case files that were stored in Sanctuary. And when he saw all of that trauma all at once, it fractured his mind. It totally just blew him away. Because, and you can get to this point, I can tell you, by reading about people's trauma, you can come to experience their trauma. It's not going to be as powerful, of course, as having lived through it. But if somebody, I mean, I had a friend at one point, she used to make her therapist cry. I mean, basically, you can, after hearing so many stories of these kinds of things, you can wind up needing therapy yourself. And Wally was already in a fragile state. In fact, if you go back to the HBO series In Treatment, which is a really excellent series, it went on for 3 seasons at first with Gabriel Byrne was in the lead role. He was a therapist who saw patients on Monday through Thursday, and then on Friday, he himself would be the patient of another therapist because he knew that he needed somebody to keep him on track. And so even the therapists, see other therapists because they know they need somebody to keep their heads straight. So you have Wally West, who's already in this unbalanced state of being, and he is reviewing all of the traumatic case files of all of these different superheroes, and he just snaps. He winds up having to run away, and then the house alerts people to an emergency. And so all of the heroes, thinking that he's in trouble, and he is in trouble, but they don't know what kind, all of these heroes come out to rush to him, to try and get to him and to let him know that they're there. And he just wants to be alone at this point. He gets to the point where he boils over, and the speed force that is inside him unleashes itself on all of the heroes that are trying to come to his aid. And so the speed force is what, shoots out of him and kills all of these superheroes. And he is the killer, after all. And so the only 2 superheroes who didn't come outside immediately were Booster Gold and Harley Quinn. Now, what the Flash did with them, what Wally did with them, is he put them at super speed back into the holographic chambers where they were able to work out their therapeutic issues. and he showed them holograms of being killed. Each saw a hologram of him being killed by the other. And so when he reprogrammed the rooms for them, they basically saw a vision of him being murdered and seeing a vision of the murder altogether, and then showed Harley saw Booster killing him, Booster saw Harley killing him, and then he put them both out in the field so that they'd wake up and they'd be fine, but traumatized by what they had seen. And then he used Booster Gold's technology to race into the future, to race into the future 5 days, find himself, and kill himself. This was really one of the dark parts of the series, is that he actually confronts himself 5 days in the future, and according to his story, kills himself, and then brings his dead body back to Sanctuary to lay it among the staged murder scene, which he stages in such a way as to confuse both Batman and the Flash. He studied under Barry Allen, and also studied partly under Batman, so he knows how to throw them both off the scent. Okay, so that is basically the whole story of how the murders went down. What went wrong? Well, you picked two dorks to pin the murder on. These are not, neither Booster Gold nor Harley Quinn are A-list heroes who are capable of causing the kind of calamity, or believably causing the kind of calamity at Sanctuary. There is no, I'm sorry, but Harley Quinn has no abilities whatsoever. She's in a place where she would not have access to all of her equipment and stuff. Why in the hell would she be the one who kills off all of these different superpowered individuals, including people like Arsenal and the Flash? And not only that, you've got Booster Gold here. This is not a guy who's ever had a malevolent streak. I don't see where, if you were going to pick superheroes out of a hat who were going to both have mental issues and be capable of killing all of these heroes, believably so, I can't see how you pick Booster Gold and Harley Quinn. Now, the two characters that come to my mind, especially in the New 52 era, and this is, the New 52 this is happening between New Rebirth and Doomsday Clock, just FYI. So there's Captain Atom, who has, gone substantial changes from the New 52. So I could totally see him losing his mind and killing people. Or how about the New Teen Titans Raven? She was a danger even back before the New 52, being the daughter of Trigon and having all these soul-based energy powers and stuff. I could totally see her or Captain Atom, these two, being superheroes who could possibly go out of their minds and kill people. These would be believable murder suspects, but Booster Gold and Harley Quinn, it's like we've been following a joke the whole time. So, we get to the final issue, Heroes in Crisis number 9. And what we have is, as Wally is moving in to kill himself, what instead happens is you have the Blue Beetle's bug crash in the middle of their get-together between the two Wallies and Poison Ivy, and they basically interrupt the murder in progress. And so we get a small caption of a recap of what we have discovered so far, and then we get to see 5-day-old Wally hug it out with 5-day younger Wally, the fresh murderer with the experienced murderer, I guess you could say. They're basically saying you're not alone, and then there's a whole lot more of preachiness as far as, here you need to talk to people, you're not the only one, you're not alone, etc., 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 over and over again. As bad as it is, we're in it together. And then you have the heroes discussing amongst themselves what's going to happen with Wally, what is it that really happened versus how should he be made to pay for it, how do you deal with this, and more importantly, how do you close the loop now that Wally has not in fact killed himself? how do you explain the dead body from 5 days in the future? So Booster Gold comes up with a solution where he's just going to basically make this into a time loop where Wally will take a dead body back to stage the murder correctly, and they're just going to, go to the 25th century and make a speed clone of 5-day-old Wally, and that'll basically create the illusion that it was 5-day-old Wally that was murdered. So, oh my God, what a convoluted story. So where we end up from this whole thing is that Wally West is in jail, having been responsible for the deaths of all those heroes, 13 heroes in all, at Sanctuary. Sanctuary actually gets rebuilt, and so Sanctuary is now a thing again. You've got the androids back up and running, and now people know about Sanctuary, of course. And they even have new guests like Captain Adam and Raven, who I swear to God, I did not know were side by side presented in this comic at all, or especially that they were side by side, because I thought of this before I knew that those two were together in the comic. So either this is just amazing subliminal memory from years ago when I had read this, or it's just, crazy stuff. It's just a crazy coincidence that's just mind blowing. So, what went wrong? And this time we're going to go ahead and cover the entire series. Now, this is where I'm taking my big time critics hat out, and I'm giving you my summarization of everything that went wrong with Heroes in Crisis. So, how did this crisis become a mess? Well, first, pick the least likely characters to be successful superhero mass murderers. Like I said, it was a joke from the beginning that Booster Gold and Harley Quinn should have been the people made the prime suspects. That just never made any sense. Waste as much space, especially two-panel spreads, as you possibly can. Oh my God, the wasted space in this comic, especially the Lois Lane scene. I can't get that out of my head, and that's probably a good attestation to Clayman's artwork that I can't get it out of my head. Expose us to heroic confessions that aren't the least bit interesting. Yes, okay, yeah, that when your whole deal is telling us about heroic trauma, why don't you give us examples of trauma that actually mean something? Don't just do like what Black Canary did, where she just walked out altogether. Don't do what Booster Gold did, where he never tells you what it is he's in there for in the first place. Actually, I think he might have actually told him that at some point, where he saw an alternate history Batman shoot himself, something like that. But give us something to go on. Kill off mainly D-list heroes so that when we see a couple of A-list heroes among the bodies, we're immediately suspicious. Like I said, the Flash and Arsenal, they stood out like sore thumbs, especially Wally West. There was absolutely no explaining why, after taking so much trouble to bring him back, he would have been killed off just 3 years later. That just made no sense. Don't introduce anything in your first issue except for what you've already revealed in your advertising. That's right. When that advertising came out and told us the whole story, there should have been a hell of a lot more in issue number 1 than just what I could have read from those few sentences in the ad copy. That was unforgivable. Make sure the most exciting aspect of your story, the fact that heroes' secrets could be revealed to the public, isn't made known until the end of your second issue. Yes, bury the lead by all means. Don't make the thing that makes this a time critical, oh my God, we have to solve this mystery or else we're all screwed kind of story. Don't make the exciting part of the story come out right at the beginning, because God forbid you should have your reader excited from the beginning. Oh my goodness, I cannot believe some of the mistakes that some of these writers make in doing these, in how they structure their stories. Immediately after introducing the most exciting aspect of your story, pause your story with an irrelevant flashback issue. Swear to God, you didn't need issue 3 in this series at all. At all. And and to just completely break the momentum after you've just established the momentum, that's crazy. It's just bad pacing all around. make sure your flashback issue contains a clue that pretty much gives the game away. There was no reason to turn our sights towards Wally in issue number 3. But you did, and on that account, it was like, well, this whole next 6 issues is either going to be Wally or it's going to be someone else. But so far, we haven't come up with any other believable suspects. I mean, certainly Booster or Harley themselves aren't believable. So I guess the only other person who you've turned any attention toward probably is the killer. Be preachy as hell. But don't stop there. Be preachy as hell about a subject we've already known is important for over 40 years. Yes, this was not a timely subject by any means. This was just absolutely bug nuts to make this a thing about, like soldiers or heroes' mental health, because Tom King he's very well involved and attached to the military community, being a former CIA operative himself. And yeah, I can imagine he's got a soft spot in his heart for that, but come the frack on. It's like to tell comic book readers who have been immersed in various forms and various genres about mental health for so long, and especially who are getting confronted to, these days in the last few years with the mental health deficiencies of the people both writing and reading these books. Oh God, we don't need to know about this. You don't need to make this your torch bearing item. Ugh. Finish the story with even more preaching. Remember, we had a whole bunch of preaching in that last issue. I mean, the only piece of action that actually happened was the ship crashing. And when the ship crashed, that was pretty much it. We were done with action. The rest is just going to be more preaching, basically convincing Wally West not to kill himself, not to go around killing other people. Basically you need to just stay stable, or it's basically like trying to be the suicide hotline to someone out there. Yeah, just preach at us, okay? We don't actually want to see the stuff that you would expect from a comic book. And now we're going to get into some new items that I haven't covered yet. So this is kind of more from issue 9 than from the rest of the story. Despite all your preaching, make sure nobody learns anything important from the mistakes they've made. Hey, look, Sanctuary is back. Let me ask you something. What was the problem with Sanctuary? The problem with Sanctuary was that even though they deleted all the data, the deletion algorithms they used could be pieced back together by a speedster of sufficient speed. Do you think that the villain side has no speedsters? I mean, come on. Now we know that this information is out there. We know that this sanctuary still exists. And you don't think that villains like Reverse Flash or Godspeed or whoever else is out there that has super speed powers isn't going to be able to do exactly what Wally West was able to do? Give me a freaking break. You can't take the chance of something like this happening again, where all of your heroes' secret identities, for one thing, or just their mental traumas, where the villains can then get insight into what can break the superheroes. You can't have that kind of information lying around. This proved that. So why in the hell would you bring Sanctuary back? That's crazy. So the next thing, make sure the payback that the villain receives for his crimes doesn't even remotely feel substantive enough to be sufficient punishment. That way the reader feels cheated. Now, basically, all Wally West gets is a talking to and a jail cell, and he killed 13 people. I mean, come on now. When Jean Grey of the X-Men, she wiped out a freaking solar system. And what was funny is that I hear that originally Chris Claremont and maybe John Byrne didn't want to kill Jean Grey off, but Jim Shooter stepped in at that point and said she killed off a solar system. She killed off an entire planet full of people. Whether or not she was in her right mind, whether or not the Phoenix was controlling her or what happened, there has to be some sense of justice in the universe. And so he made the call that she would die at the end of X-Men 137. So you've got this terrible, horrible injustice that has happened, and you don't have anything that seems remotely commensurate for the punishment of that. And we don't know if there ever will be, because we know how heroes get treated. We know that people, in the superhero community, they do terrible things, and yet somehow they just manage to just keep on doing terrible things. That, in fact, is one of the reasons why I stopped reading Robert Kirkman's Invincible. There was a point, I think I got about 15 volumes, maybe more, into that series, and then I just realized this kid is screwing up again and again and again in the most horrible ways, and ways in which, thousands, if not millions, of people end up dying, and he never has to suffer the consequences from it. It's like he's invincible from the consequences of his actions. And I was just like, I can't take this series anymore. Oh God, there were a few other things about it that I didn't like his depiction of how the main character reacts to finding out his, well, shoot, I'm not going to do a spoiler on that, but let me just continue on. So, the last thing is, don't waste a chance at the most obvious cover variant that a series like this needs. I could not believe that they didn't make reference to the most traumatic experience a superhero has probably ever had in the DC Comics universe. And of course, I'm referring to Green Lantern looking for his girlfriend and finding her stuffed in the fridge. How did you not make a Heroes in Crisis variant cover honoring that scene that gave birth to the phrase women in refrigerators? How did you not do that? Oh, I can't believe it. This was just such a missed opportunity. Can you imagine having a cover that was basically a fridge door that you would then have to open and find, something inside? I would be terrified to even open that fridge. I tell you what. Because I'd be sure that there was a another cover underneath that was showing like his girlfriend stuffed in the fridge. Oh God. But they should have done this so badly. Oh. I just feel so bad that they missed out on that opportunity. So yeah, so that rounds out the list of all of the things that they did wrong. That basically Tom King, Clay Man, everybody responsible for this book and editing this book did wrong with this book. I mean, you turned a crisis into a mess. Now, I want to go back and focus on item number 12 for a while because I want to take a look at another series called Flash Forward, in which it continues the story of Wally West outside of Heroes in Crisis. So I'm going to, drop another spoiler warning, and I'll do another spoiler countdown. But I will go into the series. There's a 6-issue series by Scott Lobdell called Flash Forward, and so we'll do the countdown: 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, you're along for the ride. So the 6-issue series, Flash Forward, picks up with Wally West being in jail, but he's freed from his jail, of course, by a cosmic entity called the Tempest Fugonaut. And the problem now is that Wally West's fears of never being able to see his kids again have created this dark universe world, this dark matter world in the dark multiverse that continually regenerates on account of its feeding off of his super speed. So as long as he is going to have this fear that he will never see his kids again, which, being a parent is kind of a lifelong fear, um, he is going to be powering this world with his speed force, and this world is going to eat up the universe. So, in order for him to depower this world and cause it to just fade out into the dark multiverse the way that most dark multiverse worlds do, he's going to have to give up his humanity. He's going to have to sit in the Mobius chair. And at that point, all of his human emotion will be driven out of him by the infinite knowledge that is in the Mobius chair. And he will not have any room in his head left for anything else like thoughts of his family, and not even room for his own self identity. He's going to have to practically self negate completely in order to save his children who are trapped on that dark multiverse world and save the multiverse. So he is stuck. He basically has to accept this mantle as being the new rider of the Mobius chair, or else the universe is going to collapse in on itself. And there's a point at which he actually says, is this the multiverse's way of making me pay the price for all those heroes who are dead because of me? And he says it feels like penance. Now, it doesn't immediately make that tie, but in my mind, that is exactly what is supposed to happen here. You know, his bond with his kids is what drove him to insanity and to take refuge in sanctuary and to then go further insane and then to kill those 13 heroes. And now he's going to have to, you know, out of love for his children, lose his bond with his children and his family forever. And so, you know, here is his punishment. And so he does accept the burden. He sits down in the Mobius chair. The reward that he gets is knowledge that at least his family is going to be safe together again because Linda now has her memories of when they were together and had the kids. But Wally West himself is now the ruler of the Metron, or the ruler of the Mobius chair, the writer of the Mobius chair, and he's got the powers of Dr. Manhattan as well, stuffed in his mind. And from another epilogue issue, it was there was an epilogue to Flash Forward in Flash number 750, in which you had the Justice Society and the Legion of Superheroes return as they do at the end of Doomsday Clock. And by the way, I do have a video on Doomsday Clock. Feel free to watch that. So when these heroes come back at the end of Doomsday Clock, it really screws up the timeline. And Wally's job in the series Generations was to be to fix the timeline and streamline it and basically make a in-story way in the DC universe of fixing all the timeline snarls that were created by the New 52 and the undoing of the New 52 that takes place in Doomsday Clock. So that was what was going to happen, except Dan DiDio got ousted from DC Comics, and they decided instead to go with Scott Snyder's route of doing Dark Knight's death metal. And in the series Dark Knight's death metal, basically Wally West gets kicked off the Mobius chair, and he loses access to those powers. And basically, when the Infinite Frontier created at the end of Dark Knight's death metal comes into being, Barry Allen, the Flash, decides that he's going to go off and become a multiverse explorer, and he's going to leave Wally West in charge of being the Flash of Earth. And he says, I know coming back hasn't been easy. Everything that happened to you the last few years was hard. Yes, becoming the accidental killer of 13 heroes for which you still have not served any kind of justice has been hard. You're still worried about redeeming yourself, and I get it. I do. Just trust me. That's right, DC readers. Just trust Barry Allen that Wally West is completely capable now of being the Flash after having killed 13 heroes at Sanctuary. Because, hey, you know, in the Infinite Frontier, remember the motto, everything matters. Everything except for Heroes in Crisis, apparently. So, Heroes in Crisis, yep, that just basically got kicked to the curb, and we remember absolutely nothing from that except for Lois Lane in her Superman shirt and red panties, because, my God, who can forget? So yeah, Heroes in Crisis, that was one big crisis of the storyline, and I hope that I've proven to y'all that, yes, I am capable of turning my critical eye onto Marvel and DC and their properties as well, and not just going to be focusing on crowdfunded comics or campaign comics like I Saw #1. Just gonna, you know, basically levy the shots where I will. And this was one that was, you know, in my mind, has been in my mind for a long time to do a video on, just because it's one of those things that really annoys me. This could have been a good series. It really could have. And in my next video, I'm going to show you how I would have editorialized Heroes in Crisis into the series I think it should have been. So I hope you do stick around. Please hit the subscribe button so that when that video drops, you will know. And thank you for being along on this very long video, I'm sure. And I will talk to you later.